Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. The paper slid across the counter and hit her wrist. She froze mid-wipe and the sponge dripped a slow line. Look at the second page, my voice came out tight. I'm Daniel Cole, 39, I already knew too much. Her eyes flicked to mine and then to the bold line. She reached, stopped, reached again, fingers grazed the edge. I tapped the column with my knuckle and held there. Say it out loud, my chest felt locked shut. Her throat worked once and then again without sound. The room seemed to wait with me and press in. She unfolded the sheet fully and scanned the codes. I watched her lips trace numbers like a silent count. A tremor ran through her hand and then settled. Not a match, the whisper fluttered and died fast. I steadied my breath and kept my finger planted. Our son's voice echoed from the hallway and faded. I didn't turn because turning would break the line. She set the sponge down and wiped her palms dry. Please give me a minute, eyes shiny but still hard. You had 15 years, the words cut both of us. She pulled a chair back and left it empty. I stayed standing because sitting would feel like surrender. The report lay between us like a live wire. She touched the margin and flinched as if shocked. Tell me what you did when you saw this. Her shoulders lifted once like she tried to breathe deeper. I hoped it was an error, she stared at the header. You printed it twice, I tapped the faint crease line. Her mouth tightened and the lie bled out. I printed it 3 times, then hid 2. The clock clicked once and then went quiet again. I slid my phone over and opened the raw data. She glanced down and winced at the highlighted markers. No allergies, no blood type, no shared anything. Each absence hit harder than any number could. Who else knows? I kept my voice level and slow. She blinked long and shook her head once. Answer me now, my hand hovered over the report. Her jaw twitched and she braced both hands flat. No one, not since the testing came back. I paced the length of the counter and back. The tile felt like ice under my bare feet. She watched my shoes and not my face. You wanted this buried under chores and dinners. I stopped where her shadow cut across my toes. Don't wake him, she nodded toward the hallway and swallowed. I won't, I said and meant it like a vow. She opened a drawer, then closed it with careful force. Another drawer rattled and then settled without relief. What exactly are you looking for right now? Proof you didn't plan this, she lifted her chin once. Or proof you did, I touched the folder's spine. She pressed her thumb to a stain until the skin blanched. I panicked, then I froze, and then I waited. The sequence landed like a confession with missing steps. My phone buzzed and rolled an inch to the left. She glanced at the screen and then away fast. I flipped it face down with a flat slap. We are not dragging anyone else into this. Her shoulders dropped a fraction, which told me everything. I pulled the trash bin out and looked inside. 2 shredded envelopes sat buried under yesterday's scraps. I fished them up and laid them on the counter. Her breath hitched when she recognized the hospital watermark. You said no one else knows, yet you destroyed these. She pushed her hair back and missed the stray strand. Because I couldn't look at them without shaking. You could look at me, the words came rough. She met my eyes and didn't blink for 5 seconds. Then look now and finish the truth. Her fingers hovered over the drawer pull, then stopped cold. Unlock your cloud, I said, palm out, voice even. She blinked twice and reached for the phone slowly. Face scan failed once and then opened with a chime. Search paternity, I added and watched her jaw tense. Results stacked fast and ugly as the screen scrolled. Draft emails, appointment reminders, an account under a maiden alias. She closed one window too late and I saw initials. 3 letters that did not belong in our kitchen. Who is that? I asked and the air thinned. Someone who ran the lab, she answered through tight teeth. Contact list, I said, and she hesitated for a beat. I tapped before she could think and the profile opened. Work number, after hours number, a short log of calls. My breath went shallow because those dates meant coordination. Put it on speaker, I said, and she flared. It is past midnight, she tried, eyes flicking down. Now, I said, and the ringtone started. On the 3rd ring, a groggy voice cleared once. Who needs me? Came through flat and practiced. This is her husband, I answered, watching my hands still. A pause stretched long enough to become a message. We do not discuss clients without written consent. You discussed enough to keep me in the dark. A throat cleared again, then a cautious drop in tone. Check your inbox for consent forms, the voice offered. I stared at her and lifted my eyebrows once. She typed fast and sent a signed file without comment. The line stayed open while a keyboard rattled softly. Verification received, the voice said, less formal and lower. Confirm the probability numbers on that report, I asked. 0% for the listed father, came back without pause. Heat crawled up my neck and into my ears. Who covered payment for off-record services? My fist tightened hard. Charges came from a card not tied to her, the voice said. Whose card? I pressed, because names change everything fast. Redacted by request, the voice answered, tone sliding guarded. Did the request come from my house or elsewhere? Elsewhere, they admitted, and I heard a chair scrape. Do you require the billing entity with a court order? I ended the call and set the phone down carefully. She rubbed her wrist with her thumb like a habit. You let a stranger manage our truth for cash. I was terrified of breaking our son, she answered low. You broke me instead, I said, and that landed heavy. Footsteps crossed above us and paused near the stairs. We both looked up and then back at the folder. Keep your voice level, she whispered, eyes on the ceiling. I am under control, I said, and tasted metal again. The steps retreated, which bought us minutes and nothing else. Open the Notes app, I said, and she hesitated again. A locked folder sat plain and smug on the screen. Face unlock, I added, and she leaned in with a shake. The file bloomed with checklists and clipped entries. There were dates for tests and reminders for silence. One entry had a timer icon with a future date. I tapped it and a calendar alert flashed pre-written lines. Tell him after graduation, the note read in blunt font. I felt something tilt behind my ribs and then settle. You scheduled my life like a meeting, I managed, barely holding. I was buying time, she answered, hands opening then closing. Time for what? I moved around the counter deliberately. To find the cleanest way to tell you, she said. There is no clean way, I answered, and she flinched. There is only now, I added, because tomorrow felt like betrayal. My phone buzzed again and crawled toward the edge. Unknown number this time with a local exchange. I let it ring once and then accepted without greeting. A voice I recognized from old photos tried a cautious hello. The floor seemed to slip because recognition writes its own script. Why are you calling my phone at this hour? Silence held for a beat and then cracked open. Because she texted me to be ready, the voice said. I watched her blink and then lock her gaze on mine. You brought him into tonight, I asked, and the line hummed. Do not come here, I said, and pressed speaker off. She swallowed hard and set both hands on the counter. He knows already, she admitted, and that word fed the fire. How long has this channel been open? My throat went dry. Years, she said, and the ground under us shifted. I walked to the door and slid the deadbolt with care. Not to keep him out, but to keep me in. If I stepped outside, I would not return soon. I needed answers before rage chose the route. I turned back and pointed at the last envelope. Where is the original consent you signed at the clinic? She stared at the appliance like it might speak for her. Top shelf behind the manuals, she muttered and stepped aside. I reached up and felt the stiff edge hidden deep. The paper came free with a clipped sound that stung. I laid it flat and scanned for anything useful. Box checked for private handling and a handwritten note. The initials matched the contact in her phone perfectly. That closed the circle and opened a deeper pit. I slid the form toward her and waited for movement. She pressed her finger to the signature and didn't tremble. I own this choice, she said, voice steady but small. Then own what comes next, I answered without raising volume. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway and stayed there. We will tell him together before school, I said, leaving no room. A car door thumped outside and an engine clicked off. We both turned because old habits do not stay buried. I crossed to the window but held back from the curtain. Knuckles rapped once on wood with a careful rhythm. Do not open, I said, and my pulse climbed. Knuckles hit the wood again, sharper, then paused. I kept the lock set and planted my feet. Step back from the porch, my voice carried like a warning. Beside me, she gripped the counter and didn't breathe. The next knock came softer, which made it worse. Talk through the door. I stood close enough to feel heat. It's only me, drifted in, steady and low. What did you bring? I watched her swallow hard. A thin envelope slid under the threshold like a dare. Pick it up, I told her, and she flinched. I towed it closer, flipped it once, then opened. Notary seal, 2 signatures a P. Rivate agreement with rules. No contact with the child, financial support off the books. She stared at the dates and lost color fast. You negotiated our family without me, I said, keeping volume flat. Let me explain. Her hands lifted, then fell to her sides. Outside came through the door the voice, careful again. Not a step, I answered, and the porch stayed quiet. You paid the clinic. I held the paper like proof. A breath outside confirmed everything I hoped wasn't true. Only after she begged me to disappear from the other side. Inside, she reached for my wrist and stopped halfway. You planned this system and never checked the blast radius. We were drowning. Her lips barely moved as she spoke. You decided I should be the raft, I said, and she blinked. Footsteps creaked above, then halted near the top stair. Go back to your room, I called without turning. A door clicked shut, too soft to trust completely. We are telling him before sunrise, I said to both. No one argued, which made me angrier than shouting. Any more documents? I tapped the signature line twice. Her gaze slid left as if memory lived there. Safety deposit box, she murmured, and shame hit like heat. What's inside? I held the doorway with my shoulder. Copies, a letter for him, another consent, she added, lips tight. Call the bank now. I pushed the phone into her palm. She dialed and waited through an automated maze. After hours notice, next available at 8. I ended the call and opened a recording app. We document everything tonight, I said, and pressed the red circle. Outside, his voice returned with a different weight. I will stay in the driveway until you finish. Not in the driveway, I locked eyes with her. Across the street, I added, and the gravel crunched. He moved back, which sounded like a line drawn. State your promise for the record, I called through wood. I will not approach the house or the boy. That is binding tonight, I said, and hit save. She watched my thumb hover like it might cancel. I am not backing up, I said, and meant it. My screen vibrated with a new message and a name. A neighbor asked about the idling car across from us. I typed back that it would be gone before sunrise. A curt reply came with one final question. Do I need to call anyone? It read and sat there. Do not escalate, I sent and locked the phone. Keep it contained, I told her, and she nodded. Open the chain, an inch floated from the porch. I cracked the door until the gap showed a shoulder. His hands hung empty, which didn't help my pulse. We need medical talk, he said, eyes never breaking line. I wanted to slam the door and bury the idea. Short and exact, I said, bracing the frame with my arm. Sports screening flagged a cardiac variant on my side, he said. Low risk before 16, needs evaluation after, he added, voice clipped. The world tightened around that number and everything shifted. Put it in writing now, I said, and lifted the phone. He slid a folded note through the gap with care. Specialist name, clinic hours, a short list of tests. I kept it and snapped a photo for the record. Leave the street, I closed the chain and reset the bolt. She leaned against the wall and finally let out air. That changes what we say and how we say it. It changes the order, I answered, and felt resolve harden. Health first, then paternity, then boundaries, I said, building the list. Upstairs the floor creaked again like a warning shot. He is listening, she whispered, and we both knew. Bring him down, I said, and checked the time. She hesitated long enough to make me doubt her courage. Bring him now, I repeated, leaving no space to stall. I gathered the papers and the recording with quick hands. I set them where he could see them when ready. No speeches, no history, just what he needed tonight. Outside, an engine turned over and then idled farther away. The house held still like it knew a break was coming. I met him at the stairs and blocked the last step. Shoes on, I said, pulse steady and eyes clear. He glanced between us and picked them up without questions. We need to talk before school, I added, leaving no wiggle. His jaw flexed once as he waited for the hit. We sat with the papers turned toward him like a map. First thing is health, I started, voice anchored and slow. A screening flagged a possible issue that needs checks. He stared at the list of tests and swallowed hard. Am I in danger? He asked, and the room tightened. Not tonight, I answered, which bought us only inches. We book an exam today and follow the plan. He touched the specialist name with one finger, then nodded. I feel fine most days, he said, cheeks draining a little. Most days is not every day, I said, and the point landed. He looked up and searched my face for something solid. There is more, he said, and I felt the floor tilt. I slid the folded consent forward like a loaded switch. This changes paperwork, but not how I show up. His eyes went glossy and then sharp again like glass. Then who is he came out small and hard. Across the street, I said, and every muscle tensed. He stood before I could move, quick and certain. Stay inside, I told him, hand raised as a barrier. I just want eyes on him, he answered, already stepping. She reached for his sleeve and missed by an inch. 2 minutes, I said, and unlocked the door halfway. The car idled under a patient hum that scraped nerves. Our boy stopped at the threshold and squared his shoulders. Do not speak first, I whispered, and he nodded once. Across the road, a figure lifted both hands and waited. No waves, no smile, just open palms and distance. Our boy stared and did not blink through the first minute. The figure nodded once and looked at the pavement. Back inside now, I said, because lines were lines. He closed the door and leaned against it to breathe. I know what this means, he said, voice thin but firm. It means nothing changes between you and me. He shook his head once, then steadied faster than I expected. It means I get answers now, he said, eyes set like anchors. 2 answers tonight and the rest with a counselor. His mouth twisted, then flattened as he waited. Did you lie to protect me or to protect yourselves? She winced and stared at the tabletop like it hurt. To protect us all, she said, and the words cracked. He turned to me and searched for any flicker. How long have you known this part, he asked. Hours, I said, and the truth burned like clean fire. He nodded once, relieved and shattered in the same breath. Thank you for not hiding me from it, he said quietly. He pulled his hoodie tight and glanced toward the hallway. I got dizzy during practice last week, he admitted fast. The air shifted because that detail hit like a flare. Any pain or short breath, I asked, feeling my face drain. Just spinning for a minute, he answered, and dread sharpened. We are going to urgent care after sunrise, I said. No school until we clear the checklist, I added. He nodded again and finally sank into the chair fully. She pressed her hands together until the knuckles whitened. We go together, she said, almost pleading for inclusion. My phone buzzed with a message from across the street. Not words, a photo of a doctor's appointment held up. Today at 9 with the same specialist on our list. The caption read 3 words that changed the timetable. Slot reserved if needed, it said, and my jaw locked. Do we take it, he asked, looking between the screens. We take it, I answered, because hesitation felt reckless. Then I want him nowhere near the door, he added. I texted back instructions and watched the car inch away. The road cleared and my shoulders lowered 1 notch. He studied the notary page like it could blink. Who wrote this agreement, he asked, voice colder now. 2 adults who panicked and chose a secret, I said. Adults who forgot the kid living inside that secret, he replied. The hit landed with exact force and stayed burning. Ground rules for tonight, I said, and counted on fingers. No contact without me present, no surprises, no side texts. He looked at her and waited for a straight answer. I will follow every rule you just heard, she managed. He held her stare until she looked away first. Upstairs, an alarm chirped from his room and cut off. He checked his watch and then looked toward the door again. I want to know his voice before the hospital, he said. I consider the risk and weighed it against the day ahead. Speakerphone with me listening, I said, and unlocked the screen. I dialed and held the device where all could hear. 2 rings, a breath, then a quiet hello that trembled. This is me, our boy said, spine rigid and chin high. The line stayed silent for a heartbeat too long. I will follow any boundary you set, came back measured. Then wait across the street until further notice, our boy stated. I will wait as long as required, came the immediate reply. Send the specialist intake forms to my email, he added. I will deliver them in 2 minutes, the voice promised. Hang up now, I said, and the call ended clean. An email arrived with forms and a short checklist. I printed them and stacked them with the other documents. He took a pen and filled line after line in silence. He paused only once at the father field and looked up. I am writing two names, he said, and my chest ached. I watched the pen move with careful pressure and resolve. He wrote mine first with clear strokes and no hesitation. Then he added the other name in smaller letters beneath. He placed the form on top of the pile like a flag. Health at 9, truth at 10, he said, setting the schedule. I reached for my keys and then stopped mid-motion. Read something. Before we leave, I suggested, keeping it practical. He shook his head and took water like a boxer. Food after the tests, he said, focused on the next bell. We stood as one when the clock rolled toward morning. We moved by plan, not comfort, and left the house. He sat in front and stared straight ahead without blinking. She buckled in and fixed her gaze on the dashboard. My hand stayed steady because he watched for cracks. No one spoke until the hospital sign rose like a deadline. Inside, intake pushed forms across the counter with clipped efficiency. He handed over the packet we filled during the night. The clerk scanned, paused on the double father line, and exhaled. Both listed for contact, she noted, pen hovering like a threat. Primary is me, I said, and the pen finally moved. They called his name faster than I expected and faster than wanted. We followed a tech down a corridor that swallowed conversation whole. Blood pressure, pulse, height, a quick clip for the monitor. He stared at the ceiling and flexed his fingers in rhythm. The cuff hissed and I felt the room shorten. Any recent dizziness? The nurse checked the screen and waited. He nodded once and cut his eyes toward me for backbone. Practice last week for a minute, he answered with calm. Any chest tightness? She typed and watched him for microflinch. Only during sprints, he admitted, and the keyboard quickened. The cardiologist entered with a dry nod and efficient steps. I reviewed your intake during a gap, he opened without small talk. We start with an ECG, then decide the next rung. He placed electrodes with methodical pressure and no wasted motion. The printer spat a strip that changed the temperature inside me. He studied the pattern and tapped one segment with his finger. Borderline conduction delay, he said, and lifted his eyes to ours. Not a crisis this minute, but not nothing either. We schedule an echo and a Holter immediately, he added. I heard the words stack like bricks and built resolve. Can he compete until then? My voice carried more gravel than planned. Light activity only, the doctor said, landing the choice like law. Hydration, sleep, no bursts, call if he faints. My son nodded fast and then slower as the weight settled. He kept his face calm, but his heel tapped war signals. The nurse returned with a portable monitor and fresh leads. She fitted the device and coached him through button rules. If you feel strange, press and note the time, she said. He listened like a client signing a major contract. I could see him growing into the instruction while holding fear. A receptionist appeared at the doorway with an awkward cough. Billing needs 1 minute, she murmured, eyes avoiding mine. We stepped to the side and met a second desk. Your share for today shows as prepaid by an outside account. She slid a receipt forward with a blacked-out name. He looked at me, not her, and waited for direction. I kept my voice smooth because panic wants gaps. Record the transaction number under our file, I told her. Mark no contact for third parties about scheduling. She clicked a box that felt like a barricade but thin. Back in the room, the cardiologist wrapped up immediate tasks. Echo is at 10 in imaging down the hall. Holter stays through tomorrow morning, he explained with clipped patience. We will call with arrhythmia flags within minutes if triggered. He shook my son's hand and looked him straight in the eye. He needs clarity from the other adult today, he added. Medical history details can change our lens quickly. He wrote a short list on the chart with exact strokes. Early fainting in adolescence, unexplained collapse, sudden death before 40. Each item landed like a hammer and left an imprint. We stepped into the corridor and my phone pulsed once. An email arrived with a scanned family questionnaire from a private account. No greeting, just completed fields for the doctor's list. History showed 2 fainting episodes during high school for the other man. Also, 1 uncle lost on a run at 38 without answers. I forwarded the file to the nurse station with a single note. Attached to chart and confirm receipt, I wrote without flourish. A confirmation ping came back before we reached the elevators. Got it, the nurse wrote, and my shoulders loosened a notch. We headed to imaging and took seats near the door. He fiddled with the monitor lead and then caught himself. Stop picking, I said and tapped my own wrist twice. His hands dropped and he squared himself in the chair. After the echo, can I speak to him briefly? He asked. We do it under my roof and under rules, I answered. She kept quiet and stared at the hallway like it might judge. I watched her hands, not her face, to see intent. She laced her fingers together and pressed until veins rose. I will hold to every boundary you set, she whispered. I believed her effort, not her control, and kept watch. They called him again and we followed to the imaging bay. Gel wand, the screen traced moving chambers with clinical indifference. The tech tracked measurements while the cardiologist watched in silence. Structure looks normal, the doctor finally said without fanfare. Electrical system still needs monitoring, he added, and my throat loosened. As we left, my phone buzzed with a short text update. I am at the public library across from the hospital, it read. Available for 5 minutes after your appointment under your conditions. I showed the screen to my son and then waited. He took a breath like a diver and nodded once. We crossed to the library and stopped at the entrance. Here are the ground rules again, I said with crisp cadence. No touch, no photos, no promises, questions only. He repeated them back without looking away from the doors. 3 minutes if it gets weird, he added, and I agreed. Inside, we found a quiet corner near the periodicals. The other man approached with empty hands and measured steps. He stopped at the edge of the rug and didn't cross it. Medical answers only, my son opened, shoulders squared to the line. What did you experience when you were a teenager? Black spots at the end of a scrimmage, came the answer. Heart racing after standing too quick from the bench. No hospital back then, just water and rest, he admitted. 2 relatives on my mother's side had episodes too. Your doctor has the details now, he added without moving forward. Did anyone ever collapse at night? My son asked next. An uncle during sleep after a long shift, came quietly. Autopsy inconclusive, family didn't have money for a deeper dive. My son glanced at me and then at the clock. One more, he said and lifted his chin an inch. Are you going to respect the boundaries I set today? The other man nodded once and kept his eyes dry. I will not contact you without permission from him, he said. My son pointed at me and then let his hand drop. Good, he answered and stepped back toward the exit path. We left the building and the air felt sharper. He walked faster than before and matched the tempo of news. She trailed a pace behind and kept her mouth shut. I kept shoulder to shoulder with him until the walkway widened. I can breathe again, he said, and the words steadied me. The cardiologist called before we reached the car. Initial echo reads clean, ECG changes still present. I want a treadmill test next week in genetic panels now. I need consent for the lab draw before noon. We can do it today if you return, he finished brisk. We are coming back now, I answered and ended the call. My son nodded and rolled his shoulders like he heard a bell. He climbed into the seat and fastened the belt with purpose. She closed her door and stared forward without fidgeting once. We pulled out and re-entered the flow like we never left. Back at the lab, the phlebotomist prepped the kit with speed. 2 vials for him, 1 for each parent for comparison. My son held out his arm and watched the needles slide. He did not flinch and he did not brag. He looked at me instead and I held the stare. Will this tell us the name of the variant? He asked. It will narrow the field and point our moves, I answered. He nodded and turned to the tray for gauze and tape. The tech labeled tubes with codes that made my stomach flip. The sample from the other man arrived through interoffice mail. I signed where needed and watched the clock grind forward. We will hear preliminary markers within 48 hours, the tech said. I wrote it down even though I knew I would not forget. I want a copy of whatever you send to the doctor, I added. She nodded and flagged the chart with a note. We stepped out and found a message waiting on my screen. The school asked about his absence with a curt automated ping. I typed a reply that named the appointment and nothing more. He read over my shoulder and gave one small nod. We tell the coach after results, he said, choosing the timing. On the drive home, his voice cut through the engine noise. I want a therapist before the weekend, he said, eyes forward. Someone neutral who deals with family fractures and medical fear. I agreed before the sentence ended because he was steering right. I will set it up by tonight, I promised and meant it. She shifted in her seat and spoke without reaching for him. I will attend if you want me in the room. He kept watching the lanes and counted to 3 silently. First session alone, then together if it helps, he answered. She nodded once and stared at her knees like they held fire. At the house, I asked for his phone and laptop. 2 hours of quiet and no outside noise, I said. He handed them over and stretched his shoulders with relief. Call the cardiologist if the monitor flags anything, he added. I set the devices aside and felt the silence settle with intent. He turned to the staircase and paused on the bottom tread. One more boundary for today, he said, eyes on both of us. No arguments in front of me and no whispers near my door. Any decision about me gets said to me, he finished. I agreed out loud and held his gaze until he believed it. He climbed step by step, counting under his breath for control. At the landing, he looked back once as if weighing us. I am reading tonight and sleeping if my heart lets me, he said. He disappeared into his room and the hallway went still. I stood there holding a life that no longer fit my palms. She approached with careful steps and kept her hands visible. I will move to the guest room after dinner, she offered. I nodded and picked up the recorder from the counter. We keep documenting until this stops spinning, I told her. She agreed and waited for the next instruction like a student. I pulled up a blank page and started a timeline. Timestamps, actions, names, medical notes, promises made under pressure. Every line had a reason and an outcome column. Halfway through, I stopped and underlined one future task. Attorney call at 3, I wrote, and my jaw set. The doorbell chimed once and both our heads snapped up. A courier stood in the camera frame with a flat parcel. Delivery for the household, the intercom crackled, voice neutral and clipped. I opened the door and accepted a legal envelope with mass. Inside lay a signed document rescinding the secret agreement as unenforceable. I read the cover letter twice to confirm the language. The other man had contacted counsel at dawn to dissolve the arrangement. He had also authorized full release of medical history to our doctor. No request for contact, no plea, just compliance and closure language. I breathed out once and felt the day bend but not break. I placed the new document on top of our stack deliberately. She stared at it and pressed her lips together without words. This does not fix what you hid, I said carefully. It does remove one weapon from the table, I added. She nodded once and for the first time did not shake. Upstairs, a soft beep sounded and then stopped quickly. I froze until his voice came from the hallway, calm and sharp. Accidental bump, monitor read it, I marked it, he called. I answered back that I got it and stayed alert. We returned to the table and waited for the next beep. The monitor chirped once, then fell silent like it reconsidered. I stood fast and watched the hallway for movement. He stepped out and lifted the device with a nod. Logged it, he said, calm but alert to change. I pointed to the table with our timeline open. We add that entry now before anything blurs. He read the last line and added the time. His handwriting looked older than yesterday, which scared me. My phone vibrated with a new message from the clinic. Holter transmission received and flagged as minor, the note read. Continue normal monitoring and report symptoms, it finished. I exhaled once and kept my posture neutral for him. She hovered at the doorway and did not cross in. I booked the therapist for Friday afternoon, I told them. Solo session first, then we join if requested. He nodded once and tapped the table to mark it. I called the attorney at 3 on the dot. Start a legal separation and custody framework, I said. No emergency removal, just clarity and financial boundaries. He took the summary and sent a checklist within minutes. I printed the list and slid it across to her. You gather your bank statements and any agreements today. No access to his devices or school accounts, I added. She agreed quickly and wrote it down in plain letters. The door camera pinged with motion across the street. The other man stood beside his car with folded arms. I texted him one sentence and waited for acknowledgement. Stay off our property and await updates, I wrote, braced. His reply landed short and direct without pushback. Understood, standing by for medical notices only. I saved the thread in a folder labeled Current Actions. I refused to archive anything while the ground shifted. Upstairs, a thud shook the railing and stilled me. He called down that a shoe slipped under his chair. False alarm, but I still counted 5 breaths. He laughed once and the sound eased my chest. The school coach called while I reviewed the forms. Team practice tonight has new drills, came through the line. He is off the field until the cardiologist clears him. The silence on the other end carried sharp edges. Understood, the coach answered after a beat that bit. Tell him he keeps his spot if he stays honest. I repeated that back word for word to the kid. He pressed his tongue to his cheek to hold tears. At 4, the monitor chirped again and then twice more. He pressed the button and sat on the second stair. No dizziness, just a flutter and a pause, he reported. I wrote it down and called the nurse for protocol. Noted, keep logging and hydrate, the nurse answered. If he feels faint, lie down and start a timer. I grabbed a bottle and handed it to him fast. He drank without argument and stretched his neck slowly. She appeared with 2 suitcases and a zip tote. I am moving to the guest room until papers are signed. I watched for the angle behind the gesture and found none. Your mail stays here until a forwarding order, I said. He came to the landing and looked between us. I want my routine intact except the field, he stated. Homework, meals, sleep by 10, morning check-in. Done, I answered, and he held me to it with a stare. I texted the therapist my contact info for coordination. Family system in acute stress with looming medical data, I wrote. Client is a teen with strong boundaries and high insight. The reply came back with an intake form and a caution. Expect delayed waves once adrenaline fades, the therapist noted. Plan neutral routines and predictable handoffs, the note concluded. I copied the guidance into the timeline with tight strokes. I underlined handoffs because that word would matter tonight. At 5, the other man sent a short update. Doctor received genetic panel orders and processed my blood. Estimated reporting window narrowed to 36 hours, he added. I flagged it and muted the thread before emotions bled. I cooked plain food and kept the kitchen transactional. He ate half and pushed the plate back with a look. Enough for now, he said, then wiped his mouth. Fuel mattered, but forcing would fracture the thin trust. We gathered again at the table for the evening brief. Yes? Schedule for tomorrow starts with the monitor drop, I said. Then school admin for adjusted participation and medical file. He lifted a hand and added one more line. I want the other man nowhere near the office tomorrow. Agreed, I said and messaged him that limit immediately. Updates by text only after noon, I wrote with finality. Understood, he returned and I filed the proof. She asked for a minute in the hallway alone. He looked at me and I weighed the request fast. Door open and within earshot, I said clearly. They stepped out and kept voices low and contained. I heard her apologize without explanation or bargaining. I heard him say he needed patience from her. He asked for space after dinner that did not shrink. She accepted and backed away with careful steps. He returned and sank into the chair with control. I want you to be the one to tell family, he said. Not a blast, just the truth in measured lines. I opened a group draft and waited for his rules. Grandparents get medical first and paternity second, he directed. Aunt and uncle get paternity last and only if necessary. Friends get nothing until the monitor comes off, he finished. I typed each segment with periods and no adjectives. The monitor chimed once more and then steadied again. He massaged his sternum with 2 fingers and breath slow. I hate that sound, but I like the control, he said. I checked his color and kept the room quiet on purpose. 7 brought a knock that did not fit our plan. I checked the camera and found a patrol car outside. A neighbor had filed a welfare check about the idling car. I stepped out with the timeline binder like a badge. The officer asked 3 clean questions and listened well. Any threats, any trespass, any need for removal? No to all, I answered and showed the documented rules. He nodded, logged the situation, and left the block calm. Back inside, the kid watched me set the binder down. You handled that faster than earlier, he observed softly. I am learning to use my voice without volume, I said. He smiled for the first time today and it stuck. We cleaned the table like a pit crew between rounds. He gathered the medical pages and squared the corners. I recharged the recorder and checked the battery level. She wiped the countertop and kept her distance as promised. Before 9, the cardiologist sent a concise evening update. Prelim Holter Reed shows rare premature beats without sustained arrhythmia. Continue restrictions and follow the plan, the message closed. I read it out loud and watched relief reach him. He stood and faced both of us with purpose. I am sleeping in my room with the door open. If the monitor screams, wake me and call first, he said. He paused, then added one last non-negotiable condition. No conversations about divorce near my door tonight, he said. Text each other if you must coordinate paperwork. Leave me out until morning, he finished, eyes steady. I agreed and locked my jaw against old habits. He climbed the stairs and stopped halfway to look down. Thank you for keeping the promises today, he said. I need the same tomorrow, even if results shake us. He held my gaze and then disappeared around the bend. I turned to her and pointed to the guest room. Move your things now and send me your inventory later. Keep essentials only and leave receipts on the counter. She nodded and wheeled the bags away without argument. I stood alone with the clock and the buzz of electronics. My hands wanted to break something that would not fight back. Instead, I opened the Notes app and wrote one sentence. I choose the hard boundary and the quiet rescue, I typed. The monitor upstairs trilled again, brief and stubborn like a test. His voice floated down calm as a lifeguard on duty. Logged fine, going to sleep, he announced with zero drama. I stared at the ceiling and let my shoulders drop 1 inch. The guest room door clicked and the hallway fell quiet. I set my phone to alert for urgent contacts only. I took the couch with a blanket and one eye open. I kept my shoes nearby because tonight still had teeth. Before I drifted, a final text arrived from the library lot. Leaving town for 2 nights per your boundary, it read. Phone on for doctor only, the last line added. I stared at it and saved it under compliance. Sleep came in slices interrupted by cautious listening and math. Every creak sounded like a verdict and then faded. I kept counting breaths until the numbers lost meaning. Morning would bring the next round and I would be ready.